stop the recording a second?
No, why?
What goes in our introduction again? Well, I know the Saffron QA speech. What else? I introduced us all, don't I?
Yeah. We're called Testing Peers. It's a podcast. There's 4 of us. Today we're talking about blah, Saffron QA stuff, and then you go over to David's for some potato updates.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, I just couldn't remember when we start talking about social media and all the other different things that goes on. So.
That's the end. That's Chris.
That's my job today.
Okay. I should compose myself. Start again. Hello, and welcome to the Testing Peers. This week, we're joined by Simon.
Hello.
Chris.
Hey.
David.
Hiya.
I'm Russell. This week, we're going to talk about onboarding testers. First, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Saffron QA. So, Saffron QA are a specialist in testing recruitment. They provide a range of different bespoke recruitment services to organisations and places across the UK. And you can find a lot more detail about them in our show notes. I'm really grateful for Ben for helping sponsor us. Thank you very much. Now, over to David.
So today we're talking about onboarding testers, but I was thinking sort of onboarding, I think taking a leaf out of Chris's book of going completely off a tangent of traveling and going onboarding, going on airplanes and doing whatever. And so I'd like us to think back to pre-COVID times as to what could be our most ideal holiday or the best holiday that we actually had when we had to onboard, for example, some sort of vehicle in order to get on holiday.
I've got an easy one here. I got to fly business class, which meant I got to skip security. Essentially, you get your own special security line with no queue, and you get to be on the plane first, and you got waited on, you got offered newspapers and pajamas and all these lovely toiletries, and your seat turned into a bed. All that stuff was wonderful. There was also a holiday in the middle, but I was quite happy to skip that bit and just have the flights there and back, to be honest, because it was the most relaxing time I could ever have on a flight, because quite frankly, I hate flying. But that particular part for onboarding a vehicle was wonderful. There was a bit when I had to go on a speedboat between 2 different islands for an inordinate amount of time. And I can tell you it was fun for the first 5 minutes. And Russell can tell you, because he's done the same trip, it goes on a bit long. It's not the most comfortable ride eventually. But yeah, there we go.
It is beautiful.
Very beautiful, but I felt a bit sick.
So do car journeys count in our onboarding? Because you have to board the car to a degree. Well, okay, mine's got an AC Cobra, so you have to climb on board that. You can't just go through a door and into it. So mine was probably climbing into a Cobra, which may or may not have had a roof on at certain parts of the journey due to the Scottish weather, and driving around Scotland to the Isle of Skye. It was the journey of getting in that car and then not hearing yourself think because of the sound of the engine. And then wearing a coat whilst inside a car whilst it's raining because the roof doesn't protect you from the rain. That's the other memory of that. Double coated.
That's a good memory.
Oh yeah, that was my favourite, yeah. It's an experience you'll never get again. Well, maybe not. But that's a positive memory because it's weird. I remember it now in a happy way because I'm just weird. If I went to Scotland on holiday, I was expecting rain. Let's be honest.
Well, I think I mentioned this on one of the previous episodes where we ended up talking about I ended up talking about my honeymoon and going to the Dominican. But that, like Chris, that wasn't quite business class, but it was premium class, which meant we got nice comfy seats and we got free meals and free entertainment and stuff on the plane, which was nice for a 12-hour journey. Then it was a 3-hour coach ride. And then it was a boat trip from the mainland to the island, which wasn't quite a speedboat, but it wasn't a particularly large boat either. So yeah, there was that. But I think the other holiday I remember being really enjoyable was one when we went to Egypt, went to Mars Alam, and that was a resort round a bay, about an hour's drive from the airport, and you're basically in 50-degree sunshine in the middle of nowhere. And there was some kind of political things going on in Cairo and Sharm el Sheikh in that area, and this was completely away from that area, and it was really nice. But it were 2 very nice holidays that were in the sunshine by the beach, lots of free drinks, lots of nice meals, lots of time snorkeling and seeing lots of nice animals or fish. So all pre-kids.
Yes.
Not done the big fun holiday abroad with kids yet, so we'll see what that one turns out to be like.
I'm sure it'll appear in another podcast later on. Yeah, for me, I've got two examples. So one was a bit like Simon. I was on my honeymoon. It was a journey that was memorable for sort of the fact that neither my wife or I particularly liked it. So my wife doesn't particularly like flying, so we went on a small aircraft between islands. I don't like boats, and we went on another small boat between the islands as well. So on a day trip. So we didn't enjoy the journey, but a bit like Chris, the memories of the place that we went to was epic. The other one I remember was I went interrailing on my own around Europe, and actually I was coming back from Spain on the TGV, and unfortunately they double booked my seat. So I was sitting in the seat and these other people came, and because I was on my own, they then upgraded me to first class in the TGV. So
Nice.
yes, so I was there with my backpack. I was having been away for a month, so probably not the cleanest, and sitting in first class of the TGV coming into Paris. So so that was very memorable.
Cool.
Cool.
Speaking of first class, though, I did do a day trip to Brussels on the Eurostar and work paid for business class, and that was pretty nifty compared to standard trains. So yeah, that was quite impressive.
Excellent. Cool. Going to the main topic of today then, onboarding testers. How do we best onboard testers? What would you recommend for people to actually do, and what pitfalls would we want to avoid that we might have come across as part of onboarding testers, especially in this time when we may be onboarding testers remotely?
I think for me, the first thing that I would suggest from my perspective, which has worked well for me in the past, is as the hiring manager, I would try and clear my calendar for the first 2-3 days, maybe even the first week at least, to try and spend time with them dedicated. Especially if you're remote, it's a bit more difficult because you can have a video call where they can access it on and off whenever they need to. But just to be around, to be that person, to show them around, to talk them through the standard stuff, but not set too many expectations to be delivering stuff within a short time frame, and give people time to learn what they need to learn about the tech stack or about the environment or about how the company works and all the HR stuff they'll need to do as well when they first join. But just take it steady, but spend time with the person being onboarded, because they'll learn more from you shadowing you and doing your day job than they will being sat in a classroom being lectured at for half the day. Oh, this is how our environment is, and this is how our infrastructure works, and et cetera, et cetera. Best to just take it one step at a time and slowly immerse them in the company.
I would argue that it doesn't necessarily need to be us as the managers. What we have in our company is a sort of a buddy. So therefore, there is one of us that is available, especially for the first day and during the first week. So therefore, they don't need to necessarily just report into me, that they can see what their peers are doing at the same time. The other thing I would say is that, I also echo what you say, Simon, is not put too much pressure on them to actually succeed at something in their first few days. There's sometimes that people put a lot of pressure on themselves in order to achieve and try and be productive as soon as possible. So it's managing that expectation. What we try and do is put them on something that is useful, i.e. project, so that they can start learning something, but there isn't the necessity or deadlines to have it done within the first week or whatever, because there's so much knowledge that needs to be gained in the first few weeks, and actually allow them the time to be able to gain that knowledge without that pressure is vitally important.
Yeah, I echo your point there about the buddy. I quite like the approach of buddies. Getting a peer is much easier for them to speak to. The relationships generally sound a bit smoother. It depends on the level you're hiring, and we're talking about here to a degree as well. But I think, yeah, definitely a buddying type thing can work quite strongly. If you're going to put them on a certain project, trying to align them to those projects as well helps, and so on, and levels and grades. And it's a great opportunity to help your people that you're buddying to grow as well, getting them to demonstrate some behaviors. And I think you're right, onboarding isn't a day process. This is a long-winding thing that's over weeks. I would even go as far as saying months. There's certain things that are done very early on. It does take a period of time, I think, to onboard someone to do it well. You shouldn't try and cram everything in day one, week one. If you can get them to do something of value early, I think it can be quite good, but that could just be exploratory testing with someone or something like that. I don't think it is. If you're independent in a sprint team, go do sprint now. I think it is something of value though, so they feel that they are contributing. But as I said, that could just be go and explore this app and just, tell me what you think of it. Give us some feedback on it from a clean pair of eyes. Something so that they feel they can give you something that your other testers probably can't. They've been looking at the same app for months. It's a good way of doing things. But yeah, I try and help set up lots of sort of induction type meetings to go on with the onboarding. So you get to meet different people, different departments, different areas, different fields. So they feel a part of a bigger team that's not just testing, actually they're part of a wider organization. Some of those are done by HR anyway. Some of them were things that we'd set up and do. Kind of a checklist of things to try and cover off in the first few weeks.
I agree with that. I think there's a lot there that we could do. I think, and what you touched on was that it is different depending on who the people are, who they're going to be working with, what sort of level they're at, and stuff. I think back to my worst ever onboarding as a tester. It wasn't the organisation's problem per se, but I was dropped into a team on my first day, met by my new manager, who came in, dropped me off with the person that was going to be my senior, and I was immediately presented with essentially a quiz of some complicated maths that I'd never done in my life, which was interesting. And then I got taken to a machine where their automation rig was. Me, who at that point had never done automation, thought this is cool, I'll learn something. They left me with the complicated maths and a new tool and said, see if you can get something to work. Interesting. Then I was given 3 large requirements docs, huge ones, like hundreds of pages. And they said, this is to bring you up to speed on all the requirements. And then my senior went on leave for the rest of the week. And I didn't even have a computer yet at this point either. This was how bad things were. And so I think about, how did I feel in these circumstances? The answer is overwhelmed. So how I didn't quite decide to leave, I don't know. But starting a new job is stressful. Starting a new job can leave you feeling very alone and isolated. And starting a new job can be very overwhelming. Those are all things that I've experienced in many different jobs. But in that particular instance, what sort of things could have happened that would have met my needs, but that maybe wouldn't be the same for everybody? And so the idea of a buddy appeals a lot, but so does not giving too much information too soon. Making sure people have got everything that they need. I wasn't even introduced to my team. Like there are simple things like introducing you to people you're going to be working with, how you ease into these processes, and different people learn and experience things differently. And we probably will at some point touch on how that looks differently remotely to in person, because this is all in person. So I was in a new building full of people, lots of noise, and I'm just going, I don't know, no, I haven't got a clue, not a clue. And virtually, if it was the same thing with those people in those circumstances virtually, I'd have been sat there looking at some PDFs, having installed a tool that I didn't understand, with my senior having gone away, the rest of the team not even having met me, would have carried on about their day. I'd have been completely alone and isolated. Like,
sounds familiar what you described, to be honest. So some recent jobs I've had. It's not a great feeling.
No, I think a couple of experiences I've had where it's been similar to that. One where I would say it's probably my worst onboarding, but there was also some positives with it, in that my worst onboarding, I was sat down and I was basically given the test strategy, and I was given a recent TMMI report and said, go and read that, that will give you an understanding of it. That was the bad bit. And my boss and stuff, they were off then for the next few weeks. So I was introduced to the team. So I got to know the team. That was good. But, I wasn't really given any information on how the team worked, what they did, what the systems were. Just given the test strategy, go away and learn that. That's going to be your focus. But the big thing that was a real benefit to me at that point was they gave me a coffee list, not of different coffees, but of people I should go and have coffee with that were important people within the business. And straight away, that gave me the opportunity to build my network. And that's something I've replicated with any hires I've done since. Is obviously it's all virtual now or remote. I've created a virtual coffee list of the people that I think will be the good connections for them to make straight away. And my new starter that's just recently started, she's gone away and she's booked 2 or 3 coffees a day with people, or virtual coffees a day, to meet different people. And what she's doing is she's writing notes, and she's based on what one thing did I learn from that person that she can then report back, and we can talk about, how that's going to help us and move forward. But the other example I have was when I started as a graduate, in my first role, it was a 6-month graduate scheme. I did 2 months in 3 different departments. Given it was the same company, the same engineering department for a company, but in 3 different teams, 3 very different styles of onboarding. The first one, they were very much, introduced me to the team, sat me in the middle of the team and in the desk structure so that I had everyone around me. They gave me some basic coding because I was a developer at this point. They gave me some basic coding standards, but said, look, we don't expect you to know what to do. Talk to the team, use Google, find out what you need to learn, come back to us when you've had a chance to solve some of the problems. And then another team, I was literally dumped in a seat and said, you're meant to be doing research, but actually we're short of developers. Could you just help with the C++ development for a couple of months and then just basically sign me a project? And I was like, well, this is not part of the graduate scheme. Not introduced to anyone, just literally sat down and told to do it. But I'd been in the company 4 months by then. So they were like, oh, well, you should know your way around. Just get going. So I can completely hear what Chris is saying about the onboard, and yourself, Russell, the onboarding is where you just feel completely lost. But I have learned a few tips along the way on how to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone that I'm hiring coming forward.
Yeah, I think we all learn from experience. It's a bit like parenting. We always try and learn from the mistakes of our own parents and try not to mess our own kids up in that respect. And that's the same with onboarding. We pick up those parts of the process that we actually like and ignore the rest. And we've all had experiences of good and bad things. I would echo the fact of meeting up with people. I like the idea of the coffee thing, but we do something similar, especially being remote. We can't just go down the corridor and talk to people and introduce people. So having that ability to, like Russell said, see people in the company and recognize their position and realize there are more technologies or more different things than what they're actually working on, because we do get very isolated when working from home. We don't know what's going on in the bigger company, and during that onboarding process, getting to know people and feeling part of the company is vitally important, because that's what sustains people, that's what interests people, and that's what keeps people in the job. And if they don't get that sort of sense of belonging early, then they will start feeling a bit down about it, and that whether they've made the right decision, and then start looking elsewhere if they don't feel that sort of need or warm fuzzy feeling early on in their career, I think, at a company.
Agree wholeheartedly. I think I found, like I mentioned, for example, before, checklists, things like that. I think they're good approaches to kind of help people you need to have conversations with, things that would be good to cover. And I think having those checklists can help you with the next hire and so on. You learn, you get feedback from that hire about what you should do differently, what didn't work, what did work. Ultimately, the one thing that we haven't really said yet, I don't think, is we work with the person that we're onboarding to tailor and to adapt. So, we want to speak to them regularly. Maybe I wouldn't speak to them every day, but I'd have fairly regular catch-ups early on, and then they wean away a little bit further, so less frequent. Because, ultimately, we don't want the micromanagement. That's not us, any of us. But we do want to make sure they've got the support there, and that we tailor their onboarding to the way they learn, the way they take on things. People are hands-on. Some people may have loved the being thrown at a problem and stood in front of a computer. Others would petrify them. And most people, it probably petrifies. So you have to kind of listen to the best way it takes them to learn. And sometimes like, oh, well, your guides are out of date. Great. Well, actually, that's a good thing. We didn't realize that. We can learn from that. We can improve it. Why don't, if you catch anything that's wrong, let me know. Also look at what could be better, and kind of use those sort of things as learning opportunities so that we can improve it for the next one. And it shows, again, the culture of learning. And you start that process of sharing the fact that you're open to ideas, you're open to adaptation. There isn't one size fits all. And it helps, I think, build the better culture, because people realize that you're a listener, you're willing to adapt. You don't have a rule book and you just follow it completely, in effect.
Yeah, one of my new starters recently actually took it on herself to write new starter guides. So she said, the one you've got, doesn't give me anything. So as I learn from people, I'm going to document it and I'm going to have it ready for the next new starter that comes in. And she took it on herself. I never told her to do it. She's like, this will be a great resource. So I was like, great, go ahead and do it. If that makes you, it's going to provide benefit to us. It's going to provide benefit to people starting in the future. and it's going to give you an opportunity to learn about all the systems and how things work. Knock yourself out.
Can I get their name so I can hire them?
No.
Shame.
So just sometimes seeing that and giving them enough space to take the initiative, but also giving them enough guidance to allow them to grow in the way they need to grow to get started is always good.
I would echo that again. The two things there. Firstly, make your induction program bespoke. Make sure it's guided by them, because people aren't the finished article when they first come in, and they all have different interests. Tailor it for them. Don't just force them down a path that's been well trodden. As much because the people who actually, if you force them down to the same 10 people that you're introducing them to, they'll get bored as well with speaking. Oh, it's another test that we need to go through. Or it's another, they're filling their checkboxes. Make it bespoke and make sure it's varied for both parties. And the other thing I would say is, okay, Simon, yes, and what Russell said is, improve your process. Talk to the new starters, find out how they felt on that onboarding. And exactly as Simon said, one of our new starters, we've got documents, we've got really useful documents, but they're all scattered elsewhere, so they suggested putting a list together, putting a document which describes the documents that are useful at the start. Absolutely, yeah. So rather than having to rely on people to remember where the documents are, have a place to do it. And so they've done that, and it's improving the process. And again, that builds that level of trust that actually we're listening and we will improve and we will learn from our things, because we're not set in stone. We're all in sort of technology and trying to move things forward. So the last thing we should do is be like dinosaurs and just stuck at where we are and not actually try and improve ourselves.
I've seen sort of people say in the past, and I've been at places where they've said, any new tester will not work on, will not test, the actual system for up to a month after they've joined. They're going to be, they mustn't touch it. They're not going to be ready for it at this point. And I've never been sort of one that suggests that kind of rigidity. If they get to a point where they feel they can test something, then great, that's absolutely brilliant, and I encourage that. But equally, I'd put no pressure on them for the first month or so, that we'd look at how they build up to being ready to take part in a project or be part of a sprint team or et cetera, but there's no harm in them being involved with the teams, working on the live systems, working on the production code, et cetera. But yeah, I know there's been stories of developers and stuff not being allowed to develop live code for up to a particular period of time after they've joined, which baffles me. Just feels wrong.
There was an early moment when testing peers was in its infancy, right in the before times, before the pandemic was a thing, and I'd had a new starter, and to that point, I had what I consider to have been a relatively easy ride with both people that were already in the team, but also new starters who'd come, where my approach was to be there, be available all the time. I told people they could blame me if they felt they should do something and people question them, sort of give them a bit of freedom to be able to try stuff out and trust their gut. And my whole ethos was, I'm going to just try it and enable you to do what you need to do to be the effective version of you, but I want you to find your own way through, and I'm just there to be there with little touch points, and almost like I'm there if you need me, but I want you to be able to walk on your own 2 feet from the get-go. And that was working, and that was great. And then I had a new starter who I did that with, same sort of pitch and speech and stuff, and they froze and they were struggling. But whenever I spoke to them, they said, yeah, no, things are fine, everything's wonderful. And it wasn't until I spoke with their Scrum Master and I discovered there was a problem, and I felt incredibly guilty. And I think it might be the first thing I ever wrote in our bad channel on the testing peers. And I said, I've done something bad. I've not helped a new starter in our company to onboard properly. I did the same thing I'd done with everybody else, and it had been successful. I was like, I've got this down. This is really easy. They're struggling, and I need to find a way to rectify the situation, because not only had they been uncomfortable with defining everything themselves, but they also hadn't felt that they could be upfront and honest with me about how they were struggling, to the point where somebody else had to tell me that they were struggling because they weren't telling me. And rectifying that situation was sort of my way of learning that even though I already knew different people need different things. I kind of had just assumed somehow that you can just drop people in and be there and just say, you know, I'm more than happy to go and talk to lots of different people. I'm happy to be the one to go and make those conversations and go out of my way to go and find people. But that isn't the case for everybody. I'm very happy to ask questions about how do I find these things or tell people I'm struggling, but not everyone is. And it was a good learning point for me, and I got some good advice from the testing peers. So thank you very much. And that situation was rectified. But as a relatively new manager at the time, like it was very humbling to sort of discover yet another thing that I thought I knew about how these things should be. Almost seeing new starters' experiences through how I think I would like to be treated. Seeing things through how I would experience things, both taking only my personal experiences, because I hadn't really spoken to my new starters about their experiences through these things. I hadn't really asked for too much feedback because we just had a informal relationship that sort of was working. And when we've talked about how do we iterate and improve these things, sometimes formal is good, sometimes it's not. And I don't know how we achieve that bespoke nature for people. How do we find out how people are and what they may or may not need without either being too overwhelming or without being too standoff?
I think that's a good point. And I think with that, you have to start somewhere. You have to have a base onboarding pack or onboarding process that you will go through. But then you can very early on see how someone's reacting to it and adapt it at that point. Don't stick to it rigidly. If someone's found a better way of doing some of the onboarding stuff, or like you say, they're frozen because they need more guidance, or they're not sure, or they're just nervous because it's new and overwhelming, especially if you're joining somewhere that's very different to where you were before, maybe a lot bigger, maybe a lot more people around. It can be overwhelming, and it can be almost so overwhelming that you freeze, you don't know what to do. I think at that point, we as leaders and as team members would have the responsibility to spend more time with them, to support them and guide them through it, and find a solution to remove the fear from them and do things slightly differently, walk them through stuff rather than giving them something to go away and read, or getting them access to do some exploratory testing to start them learning stuff. Maybe they feel more comfortable getting hands-on early so they can get more confident with the systems rather than just reading documentation. It's just flipping it slightly just to see whether that helps, but equally being on hand or have someone on hand to support them to get them going. And that shouldn't be seen as a negative for that person either, because as you say, Chris, everyone's different. Some people just want, give me the documents, I'll go away and I'll do it, and I'll come back to you in a week and let you know how I've got on. Others will be very much, pinging you every half an hour saying, I've done this first task, is that okay? Can I move on to the next one? And both processes need to be acceptable.
Yeah, different people are going to need different things. I think also, no matter what you do, there are times where it's going to go wrong. It's not going to work out for somebody. I don't expect 100% onboarding success rate. Even if everything was perfect, you'd done everything, you listened to what they said, perhaps they didn't really know what they wanted, perhaps because they haven't onboarded in 10 years, or they haven't onboarded as a tester before, but they've done it as a different role. So sometimes people don't know how you can help them, don't know what the problems are, they can't spot it. You can ask, as I think Chris did in his scenario, kind of how it was going, and you can ask people around them how they think it's going. But you won't always get the answers that mean that you can act or do anything differently. I think we all, like in everything in life, we have to accept that as leaders, we will have challenges, things will not go smoothly. All we can do is the best we can do. And I think you did the right things. You spoke to different people and done it. You felt guilty, Chris, I think, because you had an assumption that your process was strong because of all the past positivity and all the rest of it. And that probably means it could be quite strong, but it's not going to fit everyone. You can't see everything coming. You can have a conversation with the Scrum Master up front saying they're a new starter. If anything seems a bit odd, let me know. I can step in a bit earlier. You can have that sort of setup, but even so, they went, it was trivial. Didn't think anything of it really. But now you asked, so you can't prevent everything. I think you made a good point there, though, of if you're doing Scrum, speak to the Scrum Master. Make sure that they know you're available as a leader if there's any challenges or anything going on, not just the person.
I think the other thing to call out here is from the person being onboarded perspective, one thing going wrong is the thing that sticks in your mind straight away. So if you've got 30 things on your checklist and 29 of things you've done perfectly well, everything's done, you feel great about it, that one thing you got wrong or that one thing that didn't go well is the thing that sticks with you, the thing that you dwell on, the thing that you stress about, the thing that then makes you a spiral because you suddenly panic that you're in the wrong job, or was it the right thing to move companies at this point, et cetera, et cetera. And speaking of, successes and like Chris, the coffee list that I've created, that's been successful with most of the hires I've done. And it was successful with the person I was about to sort of talk about, but they had maybe 20 or 30 people on their list, and they had great conversations with 95% of them. They had one conversation with someone who it turned into the Spanish Inquisition, asking why this person was here, what's the role they've come in to do they think they can add value, all these kind of really hard-hitting questions that they weren't prepared for because everyone else had just had a casual coffee chat with them, and it threw her off completely. She genuinely did not know what to do. She suddenly started questioning whether it was the right thing for her from that one conversation. And that's how it's so crucial to be around for the onboarding process and to be supporting your new person being onboarded, because one small thing that we can resolve by conversation can be something they will sit and dwell on. And even more so in the remote world, when you can't just come back to your desk and go, I just had a horrible conversation with this person, didn't go down well at all. You're suddenly sat at the same desk you had the conversation with, knowing that you'll need to either pick up the phone or IM someone to try and talk about it, which can always be difficult.
We could probably go on about this for days and days, and we've got a lot of experience with onboarding ourselves, let alone anything else. But it is a really interesting conversation, and I think we've covered some useful topics here today, whatever time we're listening to this. Sorry. If you have got any great tips for onboarding new testers or experiences that you've had, either good or bad, we'd love to hear about it. At this point, hopefully you know that Testing Peers are available on many of the socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We're available at testingpeers.com, and you can email us at contactus@testingpeers.com. And we even have a Patreon, and one day we will actually be better at Patreon, so please bear with us. But we really do actually appreciate feedback. We really like it when we hear from you who listen to us. If you give us feedback, we like seeing people tweeting about listening to our episodes and sharing them with us. And we receive emails and we read them all, and hopefully we get back to everybody. We're trying to produce something that we think is good for the community. We're trying to give back some of our experiences and to help out. And we want to invite you to sort of join us on this journey by interacting with us and helping shape us even better in the future. So thank you for listening. Thank you for going all the way to the end. Thank you to all the guys here tonight, and also thank you to Saffron QA. For now, Simon's going to say goodbye, and everyone else is too. Hurrah.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.